Hey everybody, today I am reviewing a movie that is called Uncle Peckerhead. Now, I have to give credit to Eric Holmes, who is in the Find Your Film podcast with myself and Greg Serzabasti. He actually brought it and reviewed it last week when we did a guest spot on another podcast called Cinemaddicts. So if you want to hear his review, go to Cinemaddicts and look at that episode. Now, Uncle Peckerhead, I guess it's officially 2019, but I think it's really 2020. I have said this story many times. Anyway, Uncle Peckerhead is one of those finds where it's super low budget, kind of seat of your pants sort of a movie, but so much fun. So Uncle Peckerhead is directed by Matthew John Lawrence. Stars as Peckerhead, or Peck to his friends, as he says, David Littleton. And you've got, rounding out the cast, the main characters is the characters of a band called Duh, D-U-H. And the members of that band are Mel, Ruby McAllister, she's the drummer, Max, Jeff Riddle, who also wrote the music for Duh in this movie, he's the guitarist, and then Judy, who is played by Chet Siegel. And Judy's kind of your main star of this movie, I guess, or the main protagonist, I guess you'd say. So it starts out with Judy. She's leaving her job at a bakery, and she's going off because they're going to have a tour. And this is one of those things where if you've ever been in a small band, indie band, punk band, whatever, metal band, you have gone on these, quote, tours where it's like, 5 or 6 cities within a region, and it's kind of like the beginning of your dream. And that's kind of where Duh is at. So she's got this dream of going on this little tour and then getting the final show at this place called the House of Independence, which is where they in the city they live in. So I kind of go to the little tour, come back to the House of Independence, kind of have their triumphant opening set where they talk about imagining one of their favorite bands, members, meeting them and thinking they're awesome and loving their demo and getting them on the record label, and kind of the dreams of stardom or mini stardom of a young up and coming band. Now, all sounds pretty standard. The trick to this movie is they don't have a tour bus or a tour van. So to find one, they're kind of going around, they're putting flyers on a bunch of vans that they see, say, hey, can we use your van? Can we borrow your van? Can we rent it? Whatever. They don't have a bunch of money. And they happen across a van that a guy's living in. Kind of an older, someone about my age, guy living in a van. And he comes out and he says, well, you're in a rock band. That's awesome. I will drive you and I will let you use my van, but I'll basically be a roadie. And that's kind of the concept. And he is Uncle Peckerhead. The trick to Uncle Peckerhead is that at midnight every night for, I believe, 13 minutes, it could be 17 minutes, I forgot it, to write it down, he becomes a human-eating demon. And thus begins the weirdness. Now, as you might guess, it's all kind of plays for laughs. Now, before I go any further, once again, it is very low budget, so you're not going to have, quite as slick a cinematography, big fancy CGI effects. But the good side of that is they have to kind of do it on their own, so you can tell they've done like some pretty decent practical effects. The acting might be, friends or people they know, which is just fine for a movie like this, though. So the advantage to that is they can really have fun with this movie, and it has to ride on the characters and it has to ride on the situations much more than the effects or the settings. So a movie like this has to have a really fun script, and it does have a really fun script. So the impressive thing about this movie is they really bit off way more than they had to for a movie like this. So first of all, here are the challenges you automatically face with a movie like this. One, if you're going to have a band, an upstart band, the music has to be believably good, and that's always the trouble with these movies. If the music isn't good or believably good, then you're automatically kind of pulled out of it. And in this case, the music by The music by Jeff Riddle is appropriately catchy, but also raw, and it just seems like real music that you could have from a band like this. So right out of the gate, you're on board with that. Part two is you got to have comedy, and comedy in a movie like this can also be really tough too. And the comedy is actually surprisingly good in a lot of scenes, and sometimes it's just the characters, it's funny things that happen between them. Sometimes it's a little bit of parody stuff, so you get some moments where you see other record band, album covers, which I keyed off on pretty early. And you see a few things like that where they kind of make a play on other bands. In fact, they have kind of a rival band, which is kind of the asshole, emo-y sort of really into themselves band that's kind of their rivals. It's called Dominion Rising, and the main dude in that band is Shiloh, and he's got the faux hawk, and he's looks a little too old to be in the band, and he's a really smarmy asshole. And little touches they do, like, so for example, Judy meets Shiloh early on, and there's this moment where they're meeting, and she's smoking a cigarette, and he comes over, and just the way he bums a cigarette off her, and then when he bums a cigarette, instead of giving her back her pack, he just absently puts it in his pocket, absently in quotes. Little touches like that tell you a lot about the characters, are really clever writing for a low budget movie, more than you'd have to have in a movie like this, and it's really appreciated and really adds to the quality. And the movie throughout does that. It kind of is basically a tour movie, and they just throw in these other elements to give it a lot of humor. The element of the, the demon, basically. We haven't even hardly talked about that. But there's also other characters they meet along the way, and they keep it snapping, and it's fast paced. You're always interested in the characters, and like I said, even though the acting sometimes is a little bit like, hey, your friends are acting, it's not like super emotive. All the characters are so likable that you're along for the ride. And once again, that's another thing when you have a band. The more individual each of the bandmates are, and the more each of them has kind of their own character, the more invested you are in the whole story. And all of them have kind of their own characteristics. Judy's kind of the lead singer, but she's also kind of the plucky, let's get this done, but she's also a little bit more no nonsense. So she's kind of like, we don't need a demon, this is not good, in our roadie. Whereas, Max is kind of just the fun-loving, goofy, guitarist dude, and he's just kind of almost comic relief the whole time. And then you've got I forget her name, Mel, the drummer, and she's kind of the most existential, angsty kind of person in the band, and she has her own moments too. Anyway, there's a lot of really fun moments here. I don't even want to spoil. One involving a bunch of metalheads in a parking lot, which is very amazingly amazingly presented to us in a title card and a flashback. Love that scene. There's some really good practical gore in this movie. And once again, I haven't even mentioned Peck. So Peck, Uncle Peckerhead, obviously he's the namesake of this movie. He's got to pull it off a lot too. So he is both scary when he needs to be scary, but most of the time he's just kind of this doofy, older, like almost fanboy. And he's really like apologetic. Like, so after he like murders somebody violently and horribly, when they said that they didn't want him to do that, he's always like, oh man, I'm so sorry, but it was for the good of the band. Or, like he's always kind of playing it off. He's almost like the, talk about uncles, the drunk uncle with SNL, obviously the drunk uncle that's kind of lovable, and he always is kind of making a mess of things. So I really enjoyed his performance. And he almost looks like, hard to describe, but he gives me, like, in just his kind of character and the way he looks, he almost feels like a long lost cousin of Captain Spaulding's, Sid Haig. He doesn't, have the makeup, of a clown. Eventually he's got like a demon face, but he kind of just gives a feel like he could be a long lost relative of Sid Haig, and I kind of appreciated that little touch too. Once again, it ends. Some people might not like the ending. I really did like the ending because I think it did some stuff that was slightly daring for a movie like this. It didn't go for the exact expected, outcome, and I won't say what that would be because that might give it away. Anyway, video on demand, you can find it right now. I'm sure it's going to start streaming everywhere. I can't imagine this wouldn't be a huge cult favorite for people. They even have, Toxic Avenger 2 in here at one point that they're watching on TV, and that can give you the feel of kind of the level of the budget, the level of kind of fun and mayhem and kind of almost cartoonish violence. It's nothing is too hardcore, but it's all just at a level of fun, and I loved it. It was really good. Uncle Peckerhead, look it up.